We are making our New Year's Day kind of good luck, good health, good wealth, everything for the future meal. So we've got our pork chops because pork is supposed to bring good progress for the year. We've got our Hoppin Johns because black-eyed peas are supposed to bring good luck. We've got our collard greens, which are supposed to bring us health, and we've got our cornbread, which is supposed to bring us wealth. So hopefully we have a very prosperous year this year because we're going to have all of this delicious food tonight, and we have our apple crisp that we've had up, and we're going to finish it up for dessert tonight that we baked up earlier with our apples that are also supposed to bring good health. We slept with them under our pillows. But let's start by getting in our salt pork. I was getting my bacon jowl for my collard greens, and they don't sell it anymore, so it kind of makes me a little bit sad. But we're going to get our salt pork in there. This will add a great flavor to our collard greens, and we're going to cook it up. I'm just going to kind of cut it into big chunks because I like that big kind of chunky pieces in there for it. Let me throw this away first. We're going to get this in here so that we have lots of great flavor and have it start kind of cooking up, and then we'll get our greens in there. We'll get them kind of chopped up. They're already pre-chopped and washed, but we'll get them a little bit more chopped so they start to kind of break down. Because your collard greens take a good while to cook before they're ready to eat because they're really bitter if you don't cook them long enough. Here we go. So just a couple more snips, and we're going to let this kind of cook up. You could also use bacon, thick cut bacon, if you have it as well. Give a good wash. And while that's kind of heating up, we're going to also dice up some onions to throw in there once it kind of gets there. But I'm going to make sure my back burner is on nice and hot, and we'll have that in there going. And that's going to be for our collard greens. I just want it to render down a little bit before we put our greens in there. Let's get some of our onions going here. We're going to saute some of this up for both our collard greens and for our Hoppin Johns. Take off a good chunk of this. And then we have our big pork chops here. We'll season up. Got a bone in, which will be nice and tender and delicious. For our collard greens, I'm actually going to do a slightly larger dice on them. So you have slightly larger pieces of onion. Whereas for my Hoppin Johns, I'm going to do a smaller dice. So I'm going to get my smaller dice going.
So you have a question. Do you know the difference between collard greens and turnip greens?
Other than I think they come from two different plants. They taste very similar to them. I'm actually not sure where collard green comes from. I've just always ever eaten them. They taste very similar on the sense sometimes you can't get one or the other. So you can substitute them out because they're very similar on there. But they're in that like cruciferous like plant things along with like kale and that kind of that family. Get this breaking it up as it starts to render down. The same thing like mustard greens, they're also very kind of similar in the flavors as it is. This is our salt pork that we're going to cure down. It comes from it's part of like the pork belly of a pig. It's a little bit fattier. It's salt cured, not smoked. So it's got a slightly different flavoring to it, but it will work really well in our collard greens on here. A lot of times I'll use bacon jowls, but my grocery store stopped carrying it. I only buy bacon jowls once a year, which is when I cook collard greens on New Year's Day. So from last year to this year, they stopped carrying it. I was like, where is it? They always have my bacon jowls here. They had pig's feet, but not bacon jowls. Okay, there we go. But the fat in this will render down nicely, and it's going to make the pot liquor, which is the kind of the juices from the collard greens and a little bit of the vinegar you in there. It will make it actually have like a wonderful flavor. So once that renders down a little bit more, we're going to get our onions in there. I'm going to turn it down now that it's nice and hot to about a 7. I'm going to get my front burner going up here, and I'm going to go grab my olive oil because I left it in my pantry. And we're going to get that going on here. Let me slide this on. We're going to get.
What kind of pans are you using?
So I have a couple of different Dutch ovens here. This is a Stahl Dutch oven that I'm using. Over here, it's actually my Christmas tree one. It has a little Christmas tree lid. And then the other one is a Le Creuset Dutch oven. They're cast iron on the inside and then enamel on the outside. So Le Creuset does they have two types. They have one that have the coated enamel on the inside and one that has the cast iron on the inside. So this gives you, the nice cast iron cooking on there. Now you do have to kind of season it a little bit and be careful with the cleaning process on it so it doesn't rust on there, but it's not too difficult. Here we go. Nice. So we've got that there. We've got our oil warming up here for our onions, and we're going to drop our diced onions in over here for our Hoppin Johns.
Eloise sent you a gift.
Well, thank you, Eloise. We appreciate that. We'll get these starting to cook up. We are going to be putting in some of our leftover ham that we had from Christmas into our Hoppin Johns because it's really common to use ham and a ham hock in there. But we're going to use some of that in there. I don't have the ham bone, but we're going to have this. And this is kind of a quick version of Hoppin Johns. You can soak dried black-eyed peas overnight. I'm not a fan of dried black-eyed peas because no matter how long I soak them, I can never get them as tender as a canned one. So I've got my canned ones, and then we're gonna just a speedier version of it. But once we've got those kind of cooking in here, let me toss those up first. We're gonna dice up some carrots and some red peppers and a little bit of celery, which is more of our aromatic vegetables in here. And then we'll get our ham in there, and then we'll have our peas kind of cooking, but I want to make sure we get this kind of rendered down and going because that's the one that's going to take the longest here. I think we're about ready to drop our onions in. There we go. We'll let them start to cook up, let out their flavors, because once we start to get the collard greens in there and then we'll put in some chicken broth, you'll have less of a direct heat and more of a stewing heat. Turn it up. And we'll let this start to kind of coat up and cook. Okay. Let's get a little bit of garlic minced up as well, so we can add this into our collard greens as well. Finally got myself some more garlic. It's crazy how fast I go through this, but it's so much nicer than garlic. It's just more mild in the flavor, less astringent. And since they'll now do the peeling for you, it's just a little bit easier than like garlic that you have to declove. So we're going to mince this up nice. Part of this is going to go into our Hoppin Johns, which is kind of like a rice and beans dish. And then the other part is going to go into our collard greens. And then we're going to season up our pork chops. We got to make our cornbread to go into the oven so that can start to bake. My daughter's very, very happy because, as I said, cornbread is her favorite, probably favorite grain that I make. And, got to eat your cornbread today because today the cornbread is supposed to signify wealth for the year. Now, I did not win that $1.8 billion lottery, so unfortunately, I will not be retiring this year. Maybe next year. Although I was watching that and I was just like, something like they only come home with like 400 million. I was like, oh, still 400 million more than what we have. Okay, we got our garlic minced up nicely. So we're going to throw, I'm going to put a little bit in here first, about half of it. I'm going to wait on the ones for my Hoppin' Johns because I want them to get a little bit more of a caramelization on here, but we'll give this a good stir. There we go. Kind of cook this up. Already smells fantastic. We'll get that cooking there. Let's give our onions over here a nice little stir. Get a little heat on them. And then I have this kind of cooking over a medium heat. We're going to let these caramelize for just a second. I'm going to wash my hands, get a little bit of that garlic flavor off, and we can work on our cornbread. We're going to make a honey cornbread, which is, again, my kids' favorite. It's a pretty simple recipe. We're going to start with 1 1/4 cups of buttermilk. But if you don't have buttermilk, you can do a mixture of half cream and half milk with a squeeze of lemon juice to get you kind of that texture and flavor of buttermilk. And it bakes up just the same. Not everybody has buttermilk on them.
You have a question? Did you guys finish off the charcuterie board last night?
We finished off most of it, all of the fruit, and most of the nuts were gone. We had some meats and cheeses, which I didn't just packaged up, you know, they're kind of perfect for like just putting back up since they're all cured, but almost all of it. So it was pretty close there, but it was delicious because it was something nice to kind of snack on throughout the night. Anytime anybody was like hungry, I was like, and the charcuterie. And the charcuterie. Now, Jack was not the best behaved around the charcuterie. And he won himself early bedtime. He kept like taking bites and then putting them back. And I was like, you can put them on the plate, but you can't take a bite out of something and put it right back on the charcuterie board. Like that is a no etiquette. Nobody wants to eat after you. But other than his little faux pas in the etiquette of eating from a charcuterie, we did pretty well. We have in here right now 1 1/4 cups of our buttermilk, 2 eggs. We're adding in a 1/2 cup of butter. Getting our wet base done first. Mix this in. We're going to do 2 tablespoons of honey, but most of the honey flavor is actually going to come in the honey butter that we will brush over our cornbread after we're done baking. But we want 2 tablespoons in now. 1, 2. And this is going to give the cornbread a rich brown color. The honey really helps brown up the cornbread more so than like the sugar when it bakes. It's a nice, it helps with the browning. We're going to add in 2/3 cup of sugar. And this is a nice sweet cornbread. So if you've ever had Famous Dave's cornbread, think about that. Such a good cornbread. Let's give this a good mix in here. We'll mix our honey and our sugar in. Again, 2 tablespoons of honey and 2/3 cup of sugar into it. We'll mix it up. Then we're going to add on our baking soda, salt, and then our flour and our corn meal. So let's give this a real quick toss. Perfect. And then this is going to be we're caramelizing our onions for our Hoppin' Johns. And we've got our salt pork cooking down for our collard greens, which actually is rendered down fairly well. So I'm going to add in our collard greens right now. Nice thing is you can get the full collard greens and do all of the washing and trimming. I just find it's easier to get the triple washed collard greens where you don't have to wash them. They do it all for you because collard greens they're kind of stocky vegetables. But we're going to put in a couple. We're going to cover them up. We'll put in a couple more, kind of bring them down. They will wilt up a little bit, not as much as a spinach. But they do shrink down, so I kind of add them in the process, preferably without losing them all. But these are something that you can't eat for a while. They are very, very bitter. So you need to cook them for a long time to get that bitterness out. So then they'll be very lovely. Of course, we're losing half of them in here. But really coat them up in that little bit of our bacon drippings or our salt pork drippings. And add a little bit more. And these are going to shrink down, but they actually they hold themselves fairly well, just like how kale holds itself, but they will deflate, so they won't be quite as big as they are now. There we go. Let me get these tucked, but I just want to get these going because they need to start stewing so that they'll be ready to eat later. There we go. And the trick with cooking these is you're actually going to put a little bit of vinegar in there. And so the liquid that you actually cook them in is, in the South, they call it like the pot liquor, which is just the broth. It's chicken broth, the fat from the meat, salt, pepper, and then, of course, vinegar. And the vinegar helps, I think, break down, takes away the acidity of it, or but it does. It makes it really lovely. And then a little bit of sweetness. I don't make mine too sweet. You add a little bit of sugar. I like just a touch of sugar for it. I think the vinegar helps counteract that sweetness as well, but a little bit goes a long way. And coat these. Once they're nice and coated, we can add in that chicken broth and a little bit of that vinegar, some cayenne pepper, salt, just a little bit, and let it start to stew. But I always like to give them a good saute first. Okay, skip. These are looking good. I'm going to turn this burner down nice and low until I'm ready to return to it, because these onions are getting a great caramelization on it. Okay, let's add in about 2 or so cups of water, about half of this. Give it a good stir. See where it ends up. Because again, everything's going to shrink down a little bit once we get it kind of cooking and stewing. I'll add just a smidge more. That should be good. And I'm going to put in a nice scoop of chicken bouillon. You could use straight up chicken broth, but I like the bouillon. I think it gives you a little bit nicer flavor. We're going to do a nice little spoonful here. I'll mix it in, kind of coat it up. Get these all kind of coated with that. And as they cook, these will get less bright green and they'll actually turn more of a yellowish green. And that's when they get more tender and they'll lose their bitter flavor. Okay, I've got that. And now we're going to add in our vinegar, which I have just a smidge left. So I'm actually probably going to use something. You want about a tablespoon of vinegar in here. You can use white vinegar. I have apple cider because I like the sweetness of the apple cider vinegar. I think it works well with this. And then I'm going to add about a tablespoon of sugar, kind of like equal parts sugar and vinegar, because they counteract the vinegar counteracts the sweetness, but it just really brings everything together nicely. And again, I don't like mine too sweet. So there we go. And we're going to let it cook it up. And you could do red pepper flakes. I'm going to do just a pinch of cayenne pepper. I don't like it too spicy, but you can definitely do more. And when I say a pinch, I really mean a pinch because I can't handle a lot of heat. But again, we have that salt pork, the onions, the garlic, the chicken broth, that splash of vinegar in here. It's going to stew and it's just going to have a great flavor. And this is going to bring us good health into the new year. And you know what? My husband's going to be sick all year because he's not going to touch this with a 10-foot bowl. He might eat. I always make him try a little bit, but he does not. He's not a fan of the collard greens. For me, I think they're so good.
It's a good way to ruin pork.
It's a good way to be delicious. Look at that. Okay, so we're gonna let them stew here on there. I've got her on our back burner on here. I've got our onions cooking down. We'll get to those in just a second, but let's finish up our cornbread here. We've had our 1 1/4 cups of buttermilk in here, a 1/2 cup of melted butter, 2/3 cup of sugar, 2 tablespoons of honey. We're going to add in our baking soda and our salt. So let me grab our measuring spoon here. I believe we just need our 1/2 of our teaspoon of our salt. So we'll add this in, which good thing because I need to add a little bit more running down. I feel like I fill this up all the time. So 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I'll add this in, and then we just need a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. The eggs give most of the rise into this. There we go. We're going to mix it up, and then we'll add in our flour.
You have a question? What kind of cornbread mix do you use?
This is a homemade cornbread. I like to make mine from scratch because this is just such a delicious one. It's a honey butter mix, and it's a nice sweet cornbread. It reminds me of like the famous Dave one growing up, but my kids absolutely love this. Okay, we are going to start by adding in. We've got all of our main ingredients in here. Let me grab a measuring cup now. And then to finish this off, we just do a cup of flour with a cup of cornmeal. And you want yellow cornmeal. You might not think that there is white cornmeal, but I remember as a kid, my mom sent my stepdad out to get cornmeal to make cornbread, and he came back with white cornmeal. So, and it does not taste the same. It is not as sweet. So 1 cup of flour and 1 cup of cornmeal. And there. And then we're going to mix this in, and our honey cornbread base is done. Now just don't over mix because again, this is a butter base, so you want them to be nice and fluffy. So just mix until it's incorporated, but it should be a little bit lumpy on there. And then we'll scoop these out and bake them up, and then we'll brush them with a honey butter at the end. There we go. So you see how we've got a nice kind of lumpy, thick batter? That is the base that we want. So resist the urge to make it smooth. Because with the butter, the more that you mix it, the denser and less fluffy your cornbread will get. Give this a nice stir. Push that down and let these continue to simmer. Now make sure I'm doing mine in mini loaves on there because I'm going to pretend that these are going to bring us, logs of, what are gold bricks or gold, what are those things? Blocks, gold blocks. I feel like they have a time and I can't even, but we're going to get gold from this. I know it because cornbread's supposed to bring us money. So blocks of gold, blocks of cornbread. We're going to scoop this in here. Let me grab a different spoon. And then we'll bake this up. This bakes for about 22 minutes, but you can also do this in muffins, or you can do it in a skillet or like an 8x8 or 9x9 inch pan as well. So I'm just going to go through, do a little scoop in each one, and then we'll even it out. That way they're all about the same at the end. And then we can finish working on our Hoppin' Johns and get our pork chops seasoned up so we can start sauteing those off and have our little feast ready for tonight.
You got so many suggestions that are so much better than your gold blocks. You have bars, bouillon, bread,
Bars, gold.
ingots,
Oh my
and
God. I couldn't
anything.
think of the names. I couldn't think of the name at all. It was eluding me and I was like, I can't think of it. I know they're not called a block. It's the gold bars. That's what they're called. It's what I was thinking of. We were all on the same track there. I just couldn't. You guys know me long enough that half the stuff I say doesn't make sense. It's just my charm. You've got to learn to decode. You need like an LC dictionary. I say one thing, but really it means this. It's the same thing with my measurements. It's those little quirks that make life interesting. So we're going to go back now and kind of even these out with a little scoopy scoop. And then, so we have, again, right now, 2 tablespoons of honey in here with, 2/3 cup of sugar. But the honey flavor at the very end is actually going to come from a little bit of honey butter that we brush over, and we do it in 2 series. Once when it first kind of comes out of the oven, and then we brush over again about 5 minutes later after that first like coating has sunk in. And that's going to give just the best flavor to this cornbread because the inside isn't it isn't an exceptionally sweet one, but the honey butter is what really brings it like over the top and makes it delicious. Okay, I want to make sure everybody's going to be, none of this will be left over. This will all be fighting. Who gets it? My oldest daughter is going to be sad because my parents are coming over for dinner tonight, and normally she takes 2 cornbread loaves, and she won't be able to take 2 cornbread loaves tonight. She's can only have 1 cornbread bar of gold here. Let's get these in the oven baking. This is going to bake for about 22 minutes. Again, the honey in the cornbread batter is going to give this a nice brown color. So like, a lot of cornbread will come out and be nice and yellow. This is going to be brown because of the honey. Honey is a great browner of baked goods. That is a light. I need my timer. 22 minutes. We'll just do 2, 2, 2, 2. Okay, let's get our next part going. Let's get our Hoppin Johns. We can put our garlic in there now that we have a chance to focus on that. We've got our good, I have my onions right now on low, so they've got a good caramelization, which means they'll have this just great flavor. We'll get our garlic in there, and then we're going to add in our celery, carrots, red peppers are more aromatic vegetables. We'll get those in there. Add some great flavor. We'll get some of our ham diced up in here, and then our beans, and let that simmer for a while, and then we'll mix in some rice. Okay, let's start with the celery. You don't need a whole lot of celery because, again, you're just adding a little bit of flavor. Keep your leaves. Your leaves will just add, again, a nice little pop of color, and they're very aromatic. I'm going to kind of actually quarter each one so they're just little pieces of celery instead of, like semicircles. Here we go. And these, I just think, add just a really great flavor to it. You can omit them, but I do really love them. We'll add this in, let them saute for a little bit. We'll get our carrots in there, and then some red peppers. We're keeping our spices really simple, just some thyme and oregano and a little pepper, salt. A little basic. I'm going to bring my heat back up to about a 4 now. Get it all kind of coated in here. And give this a good stir. We'll let that start to kind of coat up and cook. I'm going to give my collard greens another stir, and then I'm going to turn them down now that we've got a good vigorous boil going. We're going to turn them down low, probably on like a 3, so they can simmer now. And then after closer towards the end, I will taste and see what salt and peppering they need, but we're going to let them really cook down and tell them. And this is where, again, most of the time I say you want your vegetables when they're bright green. If they go brown, they are going to be overcooked. Not with collard greens. They're very bitter in the beginning, so you need to cook them longer to get rid of that bitterness, which means they're going to be more of a dark kind of green and brown color to it. But that means they won't be bitter anymore. They'll be tender and delicious. We got our carrots. I'm just going to use 2 carrots. Again, a nice aromatic vegetable. Add a pop of color to our Hoppin Johns, which apparently I also call Poppin' Johns half the time. So they're hopping and they're popping. And let's get these. We're going to dice these up nice and small as well. That way they get tender. And again, you just don't want them to be, in your face. That's a carrot, just more like a subtle nod to them. I'm going to kind of cut them in thirds and then we'll dice them up. There. Get a little of these guys going. And this is a dish that it's kind of reminiscent of rice and beans. I actually, I think it's pretty delicious. I only make it once a year for it. And my oldest daughter she's typically been at the friend's house the last couple of years, but she's here this year. And I wonder if, I think she liked a couple years ago, but she loves refried beans. So I actually think she'll really like this dish because it's just got that rice and bean flavor. And she really loves, like when we go to a Mexican restaurant, she really loves her refried beans. There we go. So again, I dice them and then now I'm just going to do kind of a crazy chop over them. So we have just some nice smaller pieces in there. Again, nothing overpowering. Pop our carrots in here. Give this a nice stir. Coat it up. Throwing stuff left and right. Okay, let those saute. We'll get our peppers in and then we'll get some ham diced up in there. So I've got some sweet peppers on here. You could also use bell peppers. I personally like sweet peppers a little bit nicer. I think they're just a little bit less bitter and more sweet, as in the name, than a bell pepper, but either one works. Taking out some of those seeds. And for some reason, I have bought like 3 bags of mini sweet peppers in the last 2 weeks. And I must have just thought that we have eaten them all up, but I have a lot of sweet peppers in my house right now. So we're going to have a lot of pepper dishes. So what happens when the kids are home and then they stack things funny in the fridge and things get pushed back. And I'm like, oh, so we weren't out of it. It was just put in the wrong drawer. Or, we don't keep our stuff there, but I guess we do now. And get this. Dice these up nice and small so we'll have nice little bits of our sweet peppers throughout our Hoppin' Johns. Just again, another aromatic vegetable that will add some great flavor to this. We'll dice up some ham. We'll add that in there. And then we'll get our beans in there and let them all stew together. And then we'll throw in some cooked rice. And that's and some spices. And that's our little Hoppin' Johns. Just a little delicious kind of rice and beans dish. We've got our collard greens, and then we got our pork chops. We still got to get to our pork chops. But those will cook up nice and easy at the end, so we'll get them going. And pork is supposed to bring you progress for the new year. It's funny how there's always these like superstitious things. But growing up, like, I don't know if it's a Swedish thing or not, but every year my mom was like, she gave us a quarter and an apple. We always had to put them under our pillow at night. The apple was for help and the quarter was for wealth. And, we had to do that every single year. And none of my friends did that growing up, but we always did it. And, I feel like things turned out well for us. So we've got our sweet peppers in here. Give them a nice coating up. Let them saute for a second. And then we're going to get our ham in, and then we'll start to get some spices in there, and then our beans so that can start to stew. I'm going to give our collard greens here that are stewing in our salt pork with onions, garlic, a splash of vinegar, sugar, some red pepper in here. Okay. And then we'll taste at the end, see what salt and extra pepper we need to add. And then, of course, our chicken stock is in there, our chicken bouillon. Okay, let's get some of our ham here. If you have a ham hock, wonderful, throw it in there. I do not, but we're kind of using up the last of our kind of Christmas ham here, which is great because it's a nice cured ham, which means it lasts for a good amount of time.
Good question. What pans are you using for that?
So I have for my Hoppin Johns, I'm using a Le Creuset pan. It is a cast iron without the enamel coating on the inside. And it's actually, I think it's a cassoulet pan, which I love. And then for my other one, for my collard greens, this is a Staub Dutch oven, which also has a cast iron non-coated inside. It's my Christmas tree one. It has a cute little Christmas tree lid for that. And then we'll be cooking up our pork chops in our hex clad pan for it. So got a whole little mixture here of everything. But I kind of have, for my Dutch ovens, I mainly have Le Creuset. They've just been gifted to me over the years from my parents. Actually, all of these have been gifted to me from my parents. And then for my nonstick, I have hex clad. I really love it. And then for my basic pans, I have all clad, which were a wedding gift. So they're over 16 years old and they have been going strong. Love them as well. It's like my knife. I've had my knife for over 16 years. It's a Wusthof classic and it's going strong. Whenever it gets a little dull, I just sharpen it up and, good as new. So we've got our ham diced up and we're going to add that in here. Give this a good saute. Yeah. Let it saute up. And then we're going to get some spices in here and let that cook for a second. We're going to do, let me grab this, oregano, black pepper. We'll do a little bit of paprika and thyme. And a little garlic salt. We don't need much garlic salt because, again, we have garlic in there and the ham has a bit of saltiness to it, but just a little because we do have vegetables and we're going to be putting in some plain rice as well. So a nice little sprinkle over. We're going to use some thyme, about a teaspoon or so, maybe a little bit more. If you're using fresh, kind of just change your, go from a teaspoon to like a tablespoon because fresh isn't quite as potent as dried in there because when it dries, your herb shrinks down. So it's kind of about the same after it. We're going to do a little bit of oregano here, about a teaspoon of oregano. And then we're going to do a little bit of paprika, which is kind of a very mild, savory flavor, but will add a nice color to everything. About a teaspoon. And then we're going to add in about a half a teaspoon of black pepper. You can add more if you love it. Some people love pepper, but I like a little bit, enough to kind of add a little bit to the flavors, but not too much. Give this a nice little stir. You can really smell the thyme. It's just so lovely. We'll let that saute for just a second. And while we do that, we've got our beans here. So our peas, our black-eyed peas. Now, you can always get the dried black eyed peas that you soak overnight and then use those. I'm going to use cans. You just want to make sure you rinse them first before you put them in there because you don't want that starchy water in there because it will just mess with it. So we're going to open them. I'll drain them, give them a quick rinse, and then we'll kind of put them in there to stew. But I will say I personally prefer the cans because I find that I can never get the like the bag of dried ones soft enough. Even with soaking overnight. I was almost going to say if I couldn't find it today, I was almost thinking, am I going to have to get my pressure cooker out and cook my beans to get them to the nice softness that they need to be? But thankfully they had them. Give them a nice rinse. Get that starchy water off. A little shake here. Now, they say you need to eat 365 of these to get luck for each day of the year. So good luck with that. You know, I'll take a nice cupful, but that's what they say. Each one gives you luck. So we're going to give this a nice little stir. Kind of coat it up here. I'm going to get a spoon out now that I need a little less stirring. There we go. And then we're going to add in a little bit of water and some chicken bouillon and let that simmer for a little bit, and then we can add in our rice, which will add a nice little bit of flavor. But we want it to stew first before we add in our rice. So I've got about 2 cups here. I'm going to pour in my first cup and I'm going to stir it, coat it up, and then I'll pour in my second one. Not too much, because again, we don't want it to be too soupy before we add our rice in, because then we'll have mushy rice, just enough to stew. And then we're going to do our pork chops, which is perfect because these are thinner cut, so they'll cook up fairly easily. But let's get theirs. Before I do that, let's add in our chicken bouillon to this, and then we'll get our pork chops seasoned and cooking. But we want these to stew up while we're waiting. So we're going to add in a nice spoonful of our chicken bouillon. Give this a good mix in. And then onto the pork chops, which is what the cameraman's here for. Pork chops and cornbread and apple crisp. But it's tradition. It's like the smorgasbord. We have pickled herring on it every year. Does anybody like pickled herring? No, but it's going to stay on the smorgasbord every single year because that's tradition. Okay, let's let those stew here. Keep stewing. And while those stew, let's get these pork chops a-going. And slide these guys up here. Get my little garlic bits out of here from earlier. I'm going to turn on my pan and let's grab a little bit of olive oil. And we can have it start heating up so that we'll be ready to sear these off, because of course you want to sear them off in a nice hot pan. We don't need a whole lot, probably about 1 to 2 tablespoons since it is a 12-inch pan. For our pork chops, we're going to start with a little bit of our Worcestershire, a little drizzle. This is a vinegar-based seasoning sauce that will help break down the natural fat of the pork chops, leave them nice and tender and wonderful flavor. I grab my black pepper and garlic salt over here. We're going to add a little bit of black pepper. A little bit of garlic salt. And these are like a medium thickness pork chop, not my super thick ones that I can get that are typically like 1.5 inches. These are around 1 inch. So I should be able to pan fry these for the most part. I might finish them off in the oven if I think they need it. but they should be able to go. So we have our garlic salt over. We're going to do a little bit of onion powder. This is going to give it a nice savory flavor. So nice little sprinkle over the top of them. There we go. And then our main flavoring, because I've just been feeling it recently, is our herbes de Provence. It's a very like aromatic flavoring. And I don't know why I've been very like in love with it. I feel like you get in a mood. Like I was in green onions for a while, and now I've moved on to herbes de Provence. Who knows what the next seasoning that's gonna, that I'm gonna fall in love with. Not really fall in love with, but it's just gonna be what I want to eat for the next. It's like little kids when they get stuck in the same meal. We're gonna flip this over, and we'll get this seasoned up again on the other side with the same sets of seasoning. These are good size, so you want to make sure you have them well seasoned because, again, you want this flavor in every bite. Yeah. There we go. And hopefully, by the time I have this seasoned off, my oil should be hot enough for me to drop my first 4 in. Which should be perfect timing because I think our cornbread is going to be ready soon. So we'll also need to make our honey butter for that. So we've got our Worcestershire, our sprinkle of garlic salt, black pepper, onion powder, which gives it a nice crust and a great savory flavor to it. A little bit of onion powder goes a long way. And our herbes de Provence. Now this one has lavender in it, which really gives it a great smell. There we go. Perfect.
Well, can you go over what the liquid is that you added?
Yes, so this is Worcestershire sauce. It's actually like a vinegar-based sauce. And the vinegar, you'll not taste vinegar in your food at all, but it helps break down the fat. And so it leaves your pork chop really, really juicy. No vinegar in it whatsoever, like tasting at the end, just a really juicy pork chop, which I find like for both chicken breasts and pork, because they tend to be the meats that really dry out. It is like my go-to to make sure I have a nice juicy meat at the end. Okay, let's give this a good stir. I think it feels nice and hot. I think we're ready to drop our first 4 here. I'm going to start with my thickest 4, that way they can rest the longest. Good, we've got a nice sear. There. Look at that. And a little perfect in there. I'll let it sear off, and I'm going to just sear it over about a 6, so not too high on their temperature. And while we're waiting for that, let me grab my little pan out here, and let's melt up some butter. It's hiding in the back. So for our cornbread, the most of that flavor that you get through on the cornbread is in the honey butter that we melt over the top. So we are going to melt up about 2 tablespoons of butter, and then we'll add in 2 tablespoons of honey, and that's what we'll brush over, and we'll do it in 2 stages so that the first one kind of soaks in and the second one leaves you a sticky little topping to it. So let me get my back burner on. We'll let that start to heat up and melt. And then once my butter is melted, I'll remove it from the heat and I'll add in my honey. Don't add your honey in too soon or you're going to turn your honey into candy. Okay, let's give this a stir, and then I'm going to taste it, see if we need to add anything else to our Hoppin' Johns. We'll add in our rice here in a little bit, but I want it to stew for a while. Perfect. You can just continue to let it cook. And it's got that nice thyme and oregano with the ham. It's just really lovely. We're gonna let it stew over. I'm gonna bring it down to a 3 on here. Perfect. I'm gonna rotate this. Let's get our cornbread out so we can do our first coating of our honey butter on it.
You have a question, where can they find the recipes for these dishes?
So for our, perfect, for most of our recipes, we upload our lives to the link on our page, so you can always watch to recreate these recipes. Now, a couple of these recipes, I do have recipe cards that I send out to my members each month for them. So I know that my honey cornbread is a recipe card that I have for my members. But for everybody else, we do upload all of our lives, and I try to make sure I go through every single step so people can truly recreate these recipes from the lives. They don't need to have, things. And all of our lives have transcriptions on them as well. Here is our gorgeous cornbread on there. This is our honey butter cornbread. So we're about to add our honey butter here for this next part. But we have in it, it has a nice rich kind of brownish color to it from the honey that is already in the cornbread in there. And it's nice little sweetness to it. Here is our butter part. Let me turn off my back burner. So we melted 2 tablespoons of butter, and now we're going to add in 2 tablespoons of honey to this. And again, this is where you get all of that really delicious honey flavor, because when you bake with it, you get a little bit of it, but you don't get a whole lot. It's what you add in the end. So we want about 2 tablespoons in here. And then we're going to brush this over in 2 series. The first one really kind of soaks into the cornbread, and then the second one leaves you that nice little topping on there, like almost like a glaze on the top. But I think it gives the perfect balance, because it is not a very sweet cornbread, but when you add the honey butter, it's just the perfect amount of sweetness. Again, my kids absolutely love this. My oldest daughter requests this cornbread all the time. It is one of her favorites. Yeah. And I did it in the mini loaves, but you can also do it in muffins or skillets. They all work well. So we've got half of it on right now. You got to let it sit, let that permeate through, soak in to give that flavor. And then we will do the next round on there.
You have a question? How long do you cook the pork chop?
So for the pork chops, these are a thicker one, so they'll cook a little bit longer. I'm actually going to finish these off in the oven because they're pretty thick for them. So I'm going to sear them off on the side and then finish in the oven for about 5 minutes. Some of my pork chops, as you can see, they'll curl up because you have a fat vein. Just snip your fat vein right there, and then your pork chop will rest flat on there. There we go. Let's snip this one. So since they are thicker, these are about 1 inch ones, I will sear them off, and then I'm going to put them on a baking sheet, and then we will pop them in the oven to finish off after we sear off our second set. That way they'll cook up evenly and nicely, because I don't want to overcook them. Now with pork chops, sometimes you get the thin cut that are even thinner than this. You can sear those off in your frying pan, 4 to 5 minutes on each side, no problem, cooked all the way through. The problem with a thick cut one, if you try to cook it all the way through, you're going to cook the outside to where it gets tough, where the inside doesn't. But if you sear it off and then finish it in the oven, it's a more steady heat, which is going to leave your pork chop a lot more juicy. So you can get that nice sear, and then it will cook it all the way through. So again, we have this beautiful sear. We'll move it here, and then when we pop it in the oven, after we sear off this second round, it will finish cooking it. And they will only need about 5 or so minutes in the oven at 350. And I picked my fattest ones to cook off first so that they would have the most time to rest. But that's kind of one of my tricks to do with steaks, pork chops. If you're going to do them on the stove versus like on a grill, is to sear them in your pan over high heat and then finish them off in the oven so that you can get that nice, perfect, like juicy without it being overcooked, or if a steak, get a nice medium rare with that nice kind of sear on the outside. Okay, perfect. We'll get these seared and then we can get them in the oven. I'm gonna taste, let me get a spoon for my collard greens. I wanna taste that. I know we'll need to add a little bit of salt and pepper to it, but I'm gonna grab a brown kind of one and a little bit of that liquid and see how we're at. Actually, I don't think I need to add anything to it. It's delicious. Like the perfect. I added that chicken stock in there with that, the chicken bouillon, and I don't think it needs to have anything else because that salt cured pork is perfect. Okay. We'll finish off here. Let's check our pork chops, see if we're ready. Yep, beautiful. We'll sear off this side. Nice. Perfect. And then while these are searing, I'm just going to go increase the heat on my oven so that it will be ready to sear it off. For a quick one, I'm going to do my oven on the air fryer setting, so it will cook up a little bit faster at 425, which means it will only need about 5 minutes to heat it up and cook it through, which will keep it nice and juicy.
How long have you been cooking the collard greens, and can you go over what you did?
So for the collard greens, I think we're getting close to about an hour now. So we started off, we sauteed off of our salt pork with some onions and fresh garlic. Then we put our collard greens in there. We sauteed them for a few minutes, and we added in about two to 3 cups of chicken broth, and then some vinegar and a little bit of sugar and some red pepper. And we've been letting them stew over like a medium heat, kind of rendering them down until they're nice and thing. They will continue to cook for a little bit longer. With collard greens, they need to cook the longest. That was the first thing we stepped on there because that's not something you can cook. They're very bitter until they've been cooked for a long time. Typically around an hour or so is the minimum cooking time with them. But you can also take up to 2 hours. These are a great thing that you can sit and stew all day as well. They're one of those ones that they hold to that slow, long cooking for it, which is why I was like, we got to get the collard greens, get those going because those are important. Okay, let's see. We're going to get our rice in here in just a second. Let's check on. None of these pork chops are curling up, so that's nice. Lay that one down. Beautiful. Okay, perfect. We've got this nice sear on both sides. So let's put these out on our baking sheet. That way we can pop these in the oven to finish off. And then we can make a nice little gravy in our drippings here, or a little like sauteed French onion gravy.
And can you go over what's in the other pot?
The other pot is our Hoppin Johns, which are made from our black-eyed peas, which is supposed to signify good luck during the new year. It has some ham, black-eyed peas, celery, carrots, onions, garlic, red peppers, like sweet peppers, and we'll add in some rice, some chicken broth stewing there with some thyme and oregano, but just delicious. Let's get this hopping in here. We'll finish these off. I'm going to set my timer here for about 5 minutes to get me going over there. That should be enough time, but we'll check on them. But while we're waiting, let's finish up over here. I'm going to move this slightly off until I'm ready to put it on there because I don't want it to burn. And we're going to cook our onions in that.
You have a question? How was your stepdad's birthday and that dinner?
Oh, it was excellent. I made homemade pasta, like ravioli for his birthday. It was actually my best year yet with it. It turned out really, really well. The coconut cake was amazing. I definitely am going to make that a recipe card as well as my pasta recipe. Maybe even my filling, because my filling is one of my favorites. It's like a 2 meat and 3 cheese filling that is just so delicious. But it turned out really well. It was delicious on there. It's one of those things that's a true labor of love, but it was so good. Okay, let's get our onions going for this. We're going to do we're going to use our base for here, our pan, and we're going to make kind of like a French onion gravy to go over this. Let's add in a little bit of butter, but we want our meat drippings in here. We're going to add in about a tablespoon. I'm going to bring it around, see if I can scrape up the little bits here, because they're going to add a lot of flavor. And we can saute these onions in there, and that way these can go over our pork chops. There we go. We'll let them caramelize. I'm going to turn my heat on to medium. And again, they'll have all of those little meat drippings from the pork chops, so they'll add that great flavor into them. And we'll let them caramelize up, and then we'll add just a little bit of chicken stock and a little bit of Worcestershire. That acidity will just add a great flavor to it, and we'll have be able to drizzle that kind of over our pork chops. Okay. Let's get our rice into our Hoppin' Johns. So you can always use cook your own rice. I have found that this rice is wonderful. You can get it in the freezer section. There's like P.F. Chang's makes this. This is Innovations, but it's like so nice. It's so much better than any rice I cook, I'll tell you. But we're going to mix this into our things. You can always leave it separate and scoop it out, but I like to mix it in so it kind of soaks up all the flavors in our Hoppin' Johns here. This is about 2 or so cups for this. You typically need about 1 cup of rice to 1 can of beans. And just mix it in. I let it kind of de-thaw a little bit, and then it will start to soak up the flavor of our like whole little mixture, the oregano, the thyme, the ham, and just adds those nice flavors, assuming I don't dump it all out. There we go. Perfect. And that's why when I added in my liquid earlier, I was like, we don't want to add too much in, because if you have too much liquid, then you'll have a soupier base, and you want just enough for the rice to soak up, but so that your rice isn't soggy. Beautiful. So this is where I always like to say it's kind of like a rice and beans dish, because the black-eyed peas kind of taste like a bean. There. I'm going to turn this down nice and low, and then we'll add some green onions on here. Give our collard greens a quick turn. And then we can check on our onions here, and then we're going to brush our honey butter over our cornbread one last time, and then we should be about ready to take everything out.
Judy sent you a gift.
Well, thank you, Judy. We appreciate that. Give this a nice caramelization, because who doesn't love caramelized onions on their pork chops? Okay, we have our fresh onion, which adds just a nice pop of color and a little brightness to a very rich dish. I feel like with the beans and the ham, it's a nice rich dish, so this adds great flavor. You could also do fresh parsley for it. And once we get these chopped, we can go grab our pork chops out, because they are beeping at us, and they should be nice and done. There we go. So let's sprinkle these on top, and then we'll stir them in when we come back. Let's go grab our pork chops out. They should be done. That air fryer setting cooks it up nice and high pretty fast, so they'll cook up firm through. We already started that cooking process, so it shouldn't take us too long to get there. Let me grab them a little touch. Perfect. I'll know by just kind of the firmness of them if they're cooked. Beautiful. Yep, looking good. And perfect. So we are just about ready for this. Now, if your pork chops, taking them out of the oven, again, nice and hot, let them sit for a minute or two. They will continue cooking as you take them out. And you never want to cut into your pork or any hot meat while it's still very, very hot, because all of its natural juices will kind of seep out. And we don't want that, because then it just won't taste as good. Won't be as juicy. Put our last coating of honey butter.
D-Mac sent you again.
Well, thank you, D-Mac. We appreciate that. Here, let's give.
I do have a question. At what age did you introduce onions to your kids?
Honestly, I would say definitely by one. They kind of ate, I made all of their own baby food, so kind of homemade. But right around once they started eating solid foods, they just started to really eat what we ate, just kind of chopped up on there. So they've kind of really been eating it ever since then. When I made their baby foods, it was more simplified, less spices, because as you know, babies, their taste buds are very, very intense. So all flavors are strong to them in the beginning. So that's why they say be very mild on spices and stuff like that. Except Evie. Evie loved lemons, limes, wasabi, almonds. She could take it all. She was my crazy one. Okay, let's stir this in. We've got those green onions in. Look at that. Looks fantastic. Beautiful. Let's get a little bit of our Worcestershire in here. Add a little nice flavor. Just a little drizzle, like a half a teaspoon. And a little garlic salt to our kind of caramelized onions here. Beautiful. And we are about ready to serve up our dinner. So let me grab everything out. Let me turn off, and off. Okay. Let's get our plate ready for the new year. Okay, I've got this, got that. Tongs for this. I'm going to bring this over here. Like I said, my oldest daughter, she's going to be sad because she can only have one cornbread tonight and not her usual two, because my parents are coming over. Okay, let's just get one pre-cut out. There we go. Look at this beautiful golden cornbread. So for dinner tonight, we have our cornbread, which is supposed to signify wealth for the year. We have our pork chop that we seasoned with herbes de Provence. We seared off in our pan and finished in the oven, and we're going to top it with our caramelized onions. That's supposed to signify our progress for the new year. We have our collard greens that we cooked in salt pork and stewed in a nice kind of base with chicken bouillon, vinegar, a little bit of sugar, and that kind of signifies that we're going to be healthy for the year. And then we have our Hoppin Johns with our black-eyed peas, which is supposed to bring us great luck. It has rice, carrots, sweet peppers, celery, ham in there, and it's kind of cooked in a nice savory broth with thyme and oregano. But it's just kind of a delicious meal for the new year to hopefully bring us both health, wealth, and progress. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to our page, search for what we made. So we've got our whole New Year's Eve feast here, and you can watch and cook along with me again. We also have our link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it. We've got our Dutch ovens, my hex clad pans, my knives, my cutting boards, all the different things I use in the kitchen in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.